He is State Representative Dave Reed, the House Majority Leader, and he's in the studio with us right now. Good morning.
Good morning, Todd.
Good to have you with us here today. A lot going on in Harrisburg as we get the new year underway. Of course, in our news today, Representative Dush and others formed this new caucus and come up with a welfare reform package of bills. That's a pretty extensive bunch of bills they came out with.
Yeah, it's a number of bills. They're not new bills. We've actually been working on those bills for quite some time.
Does that come from your initiative a couple of years ago?
Yeah, a lot of them came from what we did when I was policy chairman with welfare reform and some of the anti-poverty initiatives. Some of them date back to actually back when Speaker Turzai was the policy chairman back in 08, 09. Mm-hmm. So just really regurgitating some of the ideas that were out there before that haven't made it over the goal line in the past. But, that's a topic of discussion. We need to look at it. It's one of the top cost drivers in the state budget, along with our correctional system and our pension obligations. So I think looking at different ways to reform our welfare system, and more importantly, different ways of helping people, grow out of poverty, whether it be through education, workforce development, or other means of helping to get folks into a situation where they're financially secure for themselves and their families.
Some of the things they talk about, and we're speaking of yesterday, have to do with basically changing a mindset has developed. And as Representative Dush said in his news bite this morning, kids are graduating from school with no intention of ever entering into a job market because they're considering welfare recipient to be their job.
Yeah, look, I'm sure there are some folks out there in that category. I think the predominant side of the population, young folks are graduating and looking for employment and struggle, particularly in the Rust Belt states, to find employment near their families. So I think we've got to do a better job from the beginning of our educational system to the end of coordinating the efforts between, early childhood education, basic education, higher education, career and technical education, so that we're actually producing young people, workers for jobs that are going to exist in the year 2017 and beyond. If you look at the numbers in Western Pennsylvania, they're actually projecting over the next 5 to 10 years, we're going to have a shortage of over 100,000 skilled laborers in the western half of the state. We've got to find a better job of connecting young folks and even folks looking for new employment in one form or another to the jobs that are going to be existing and making sure they're getting the skill sets that will allow them to succeed in the workplace.
That really is a big part of the whole budget cycle, isn't it? The puzzle that is the budget is there are going to be jobs here and a whole bunch of them. Getting the people qualified so that they can fill those jobs is going to be a real key. And educationally, that's where it starts.
Well, and if you look at Western Pennsylvania for about 2 decades, most of the 80s and 90s, even the beginning part of this new century, we went from a situation where we had a ton of skilled laborers, a ton of workers looking for jobs, but no jobs for them to fit into. Now we're actually almost headed towards the opposite situation where we're going to have openings, particularly in the healthcare field, in the technology field, in other skilled laborers, whether it be welders or plumbers or heating and air conditioning folks or just carpenters or electricians. All of a sudden we're going to be in a situation where we have job openings, but we don't have employees who are trained to actually take those openings, and that can only exist for so long before companies move out of the area, and that's the last thing we want to see occur in the entire western part of the state. We fought so hard to get to a situation where our economy is diversified, where it's moving in the right direction overall. It would be a real shame if we didn't have the workforce trained to enter into those positions.
Yeah, chemical engineering is going to be really, really big. Engineering of any sort.
Engineering in general, when you look at, the energy field, when you look at manufacturing, just, a packaging engineer. There are actually engineers out there that help determine, the right way to package and ship products that save companies, thousands, if not millions of dollars, and very high-paid positions that, those are not the type of engineers you think of, but those are engineers that are in demand.
Yeah, okay. Well, the state system of higher education is in the process of sort of redesigning itself to meet some of those needs. I know that as a very interested observer, and a little bit more than just an interested observer, you have your eye on that.
Yeah, and I actually think the state system is an ideal place to start that conversation. It's a system that's owned by the state. It's a system that can really offer a bridge from a lot of families, first-generation college students, to the workplace, It's a system that can maybe be a little bit more creative in coordinating those efforts between our high schools, our career and technical programs, our community colleges, and actually become a filter system where folks start in some of those places and end up with a 4-year degree from our state system schools, whether they're entering into it in a traditional format where straight out of high school, you're going to a 4-year degree program, or you're going to a career and technical program, apprenticeship program, community college, getting some workplace experience, and then finishing up your degree program at the state system. I think it's an amazing opportunity for the state system to reinvent workforce development and education as a whole in Pennsylvania. If you look at IUP, that it's actually a pretty good example of how they've done some of their nursing programs, where they've coordinated efforts with the adult education program over at ICTC, and folks are entering into the world with the nursing experience, beginning that entry into the workplace, and then finishing up a 4-year degree or master's degree at a place like IUP.
Seems so refreshing to talk to you and not have the budget be the number one thing we're talking about in a stalemate. But with that in mind, the budget talks will soon be once again ramping up. We'll have the governor's budget address and then the response, and then we'll have this period of time between the address and basically the month of June when it will be shuffled about in Harrisburg. Various committees will be meeting. You'll certainly be a part of all of those conversations as well as we look forward to the spring term and really the winter term that has just begun. What are some of the things you expect to be happening over the next few months?
Well, I think the budget discussions have already started with the beginning of the new year. I was actually out in Harrisburg yesterday, had the first meeting with the governor's office, just as kind of a primer going in to the governor's budget address here in a couple weeks. And this year, unlike last year, revenue collections for this year are actually on target. By this time last year, we were already about $500 million short of expectations. We finished about $1.5 billion short of expectations. If this year holds in the direction it's headed, it will make the whole budget process a heck of a lot easier. So hopefully that will continue to have that trend moving forward. I think we're about $60 to $90 million actually above expectations so far for this year. So that'll kick off in February. As you said, we'll go through the appropriations process, and hopefully the House, Senate, and the administration can reach a conclusion in a shorter time frame. But there are, a number of other issues I think folks want to take a look at this year, whether it be, tax reform as a whole, with what happened at the federal level, folks talking about tax reform. I think at the state level, with the implications down to the states, it's an opportunity for us to talk about, is there a way to get more money in the paychecks of our workers here at the state level by revamping our tax system, make it a little bit more fair and more equitable for the year 2018 and beyond. Certainly the property tax issue is still at the forefront. I know the Senate's still working on Senate Bill 76, trying to come up with the right combination that can lead that bill to passage. I think workforce development, as we just talked about a little bit, is a key issue for us in the western half of the state going forward. We need to get prepared for the opportunities that are going to be out there. We need to take advantage of all the great educational programs and institutions we have in this state, get those efforts coordinated just a little bit better together, and really give young folks a chance to work, raise their family, and stay in this state if they want to.
Do you get a sense when you get out into the public that people have the mindset that we've sent you enough money, you need to figure out how to spend it better, and this is what we have to give to you. Don't ask for any more. Do you get that sense?
Look, I think that's always the sense. In fact, I think most folks, including myself, would be of the mindset, we sent you too much money. How about giving some of that money back to us?
Here's a plan.
And we can spend it better than you. And I actually think that's a testament of what happened at the federal level. It is a little bit of an odd dynamic to hear folks complain about getting more of their own money back that they're sending to the federal government to be able to spend for themselves. But we'll see how that dynamic plays out over the next couple months. Look, I think most folks have different priorities when it comes to government. Some folks are focused on education, some on environmental protection, some on transportation, some on public safety. And when you bring that whole collective set of interests together, you come up with the core functions in government that most folks agree, hey, we want to make sure those things are taken care of. We want to make sure our young folks are educated. We want to make sure our police, our fire departments, have the resources necessary to protect our communities. We want a decent, transportation and infrastructure network. We want a safety net. If somebody, falls out of economic favor to no fault of their own, they lose their job during tough economic times, we want to make sure there's somebody there to pick them back up, get them back into the workplace. I think when it gets to some of the other more frivolous sides of spending, that's where we all become a little bit frustrated and say, can't we refocus those dollars to programs that are working to help make people more self-sustaining, more financially independent, and less dependent upon government in one form or another.
So many households have to make choices through the way that they budget, and there's always something set aside for an emergency. You hope that there's always something to set aside for an emergency. Pennsylvania is in that boat a little bit from the opioid thing. That's the household emergency that has cropped up and is really eating up a bunch of money.
Yeah, when you look across the state, you go to different areas. Some areas you talk about jobs because that's the number one issue. Other areas, property taxes or public safety or education. The one issue I've found in every corner of the state that's, in the top one or two issues is the opioid crisis. And, not just from the perspective of the drug cartel that's bringing these drugs into our community, the treatment side of the disease, but also the community impact, the family impact to the folks who are left behind as a result of this crisis. Folks who had a loved one, a friend, or a family member who dealt with it and ultimately was not able to survive, that battle. It leaves behind an entire community that is scarred for life, and it has a financial impact on our government. It has a financial impact on our community, but I think that emotional impact, that lack of hope in dealing with that sort of crisis, may be the most disturbing part of that trend in recent years.
He is State House Majority Leader Dave Reed joining us here this morning on Indiana in the Morning. All right, I have to ask it. Will you be able to concentrate in Harrisburg when you're also running for Congress to replace Bill Shuster in the Republican spring primary?
I have to say I was shocked when that came across the news ticker. I hadn't talked to Congressman Shuster for a little while here, and was somewhat shocked to hear that he was not running for office again and announcing at this sort of late date. So I'm sure there'll be a lot of qualified folks, and hopefully we have somebody in the 9th Congressional District that'll step up and, do a good job, particularly back here at home, focusing on the counties and the communities and the citizens within the 9th District, and actually go to D.C. and try to get something done, which would be refreshing from the D.C. perspective.
Your phone didn't start ringing and you didn't start answering?
The phone may have started ringing. I haven't started answering.
Thanks, Dave. It's Indiana in the Morning, AM 1160, WCCS 101.1 FM. Thank you.
Todd, have a good week.
You too.